14, verse 8. The verse tells us, "Vayachazek Hashem slave Paro melech Mitzrayim." God hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Vayrdof achrei bnei Yisrael, and they pursued after the children of Israel. Shoshana, you have it?
What page? Which page are they on?
What page? Seth, you have the page?
359. 359.
Ubnei Yisrael yotzim b'yad ramah, and the children of Israel left with a mighty hand, b'yad ramah. So let's see what Rashi says, chapter 14, verse 8. And Hashem hardened the heart of Pharaoh. Shayatoa imurdof imlav. Hashem strengthened the heart of Pharaoh, for Pharaoh was unsure whether to pursue them or not. And he strengthened his mind to pursue them. But so it's interesting here what Rashi is saying, that Pharaoh was vacillating here, and Pharaoh himself wasn't sure. We did the Midrash today in our Torah class, which talks about how Midrash says Pharaoh actually repented, and that Pharaoh was the only one who survived this battle because he changed his mind. Okay, Biyad Ramah, with a raised hand, Begvura Gvoa Mefor Semet, with a lofty and openly displayed hand. Yeah, okay, verse 9. Vayirdefu Mitzrayim acharayim, and the Egyptians pursued them. Vayasigu otam chonim al yam, and they overtook them, camped by the sea. Kol sus rechav paro ufarashav v'chelo, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh and his army, al piach hirot of Baal Tzifon, by piach hirot, before Baal Tzifon. Okay, verse 10. Upharaoh ekriv, vayisu b'nei Yisrael aseinayim, and Pharaoh came close, and the children of Israel lifted up their eyes. V'nei Mitzrayim nosei achareim, and behold, they saw the Egyptians running after them. Vayiru ma'od, and they were very afraid. Vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael al Hashem, and the children of Israel cried out to God. What does Rashi say? Vayirdefu Mitzrayim. What does Rashi say here? Chapter verse 10. Upharaoh ekriv. It should have written Upharaoh karav. It should have said Pharaoh drew close. Ma'u ekriv. What does it mean by the fact that it said he brought close? He kriv atzmo v'nitametz l'kadeim l'fneim. He brought himself close and wanted to go at the head of his troops. Kemoshe Isnaim, and Pharaoh went first. He said, I'm going to be the first one. And then the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and they saw the Egyptians were traveling after them. All the Egyptians were of one mind. All the Egyptians were running after them. They saw the angel of the Egyptians traveling from heaven to help them. Wow.
Who said that?
What?
Where's that?
Rashi says it because it says Mitzrayim was traveling after them. So he says Mitzrayim doesn't refer to because how could the land travel? So therefore Rashi is saying it refers not to because why is it in the singular? It should have said that we saw the Egyptians. So that's why he's saying it was the angel of the Egyptians who was traveling after them. And children of Israel cried out. Why did they cry out? Rashi says, Tafsu manutz avosam. They cried out, they seized the hold, they adopted the profession of their ancestors. By Abraham, it states, that Abraham went to the place where he had stood. By Yitzchak, it says, Lasuach pasadeh. Isaac went to pray. By Yaakov, Vayivka b'makom. So they basically were praying like their ancestors did. But that didn't last long, because then they turned to Moses in verse 11. They said to Moshe, were there not enough desert graves in Egypt that you took us to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us to take us out of Egypt? They were not happy with Moshe. Were there not enough graves? Chesron kvarim shein kvarim b'Mitzrayim likaver sham, where there are an insufficient number of graves that you need to find a new graveyard for us. They took us from there. In French, it's si for fariant dit non français. How's my pronunciation?
It's great, but I think this is the only time that Rashi says a whole sentence, right? Like he usually translates a word, but not a whole expression.
So that's a good point. So the commentary says that Rashi translates the phrase into French, not just the sentence, to show that the double negative is sometimes acceptable in other languages also. That's what Rashi is showing.
Wow.
You must speak French there up in where you're part of Canada.
I don't, because I grew up in Israel, but New Brunswick is the only province that is bilingual. So they expect me to actually say my speeches and like not in shul, but
it's the only province that's bilingual.
Yeah. So Quebec is only French. Like they accept English, but they don't. But the government, and this is the only one that government workers have to know both. And thank God I'm not a government worker, because otherwise I would be very big trouble.
All right. How about Zadavar? So they said, didn't we warn you about this? Zadavar should be way more. This is what we warned you about in Egypt. Chadal mimenu. What do you think, Benjamin? You saw it? Hey, Chadal mimenu v'navdad Mitzrayim. Cease from us, and we will serve the Egyptians. Benjamin, here's a chumash over here. Here, Meyer, give the chumash to Benjamin. They said, cease from us, and we will work in Egypt. Kitov vanu avodat Mitzrayim mimutenu b'midbar. We'd rather be slaves in Egypt than to die in the wilderness. So thank you. So this is what we warned you about when we spoke to you in Egypt. Where did they say this? They said, may Hashem reveal himself to you and carry out in judgment. So this is such a powerful idea that the Jews, at the first sign of trouble, they said, were there not enough graves in Egypt? This reminds me of the phrase that when Moshe first goes to Paro, what did they say to him, Moshe? You ruined us in the eyes of Paro. You ruined our reputation with Paro.
You took away the straw, right?
Yeah, but then they said that you ruined our reputation with Paro. I think about that phrase a lot. You ruined, here's this guy as a genocidal killer. You ruined our influence with him. So,
a tough crowd.
What?
I said they were a tough crowd.
Yeah. Yeah.
Barbanel asked
Barbanel, yeah, no.
He throws a good curveball in there. He says, here they are, they're just getting out of Egypt.
Yeah.
And their very first thought is, instead, they said, why have you taken? He said, Moses, why did you do it?
Right.
Forgetting that 5 minutes ago, God took them out of Egypt.
Not only that, also Paro sent them out.
Right.
Paro kicked them out.
But God is in charge of the whole thing.
Right.
Right now. I mean, he said it's not a lot of Malach and not a lot of Moshe.
Right.
That's the only thing you get out of the gutter. You have to learn that.
Exactly.
They immediately complained the wrong.
It's a very good point. It's a very good point. Very good. Okay, we're on chapter 14. Chapter 14, verse 13 in Exodus. Vayomer Moshe La'am, Baruch atah Adonai Elohim she'akol niyeh b'baruch.
Amen.
And Moshe says to the people, Al tira'u, don't be afraid. Hisyatzvu ru'u es Yeshuas Hashem, asher yaseh ochem hayom. Don't be afraid. Stand strong, and you will see the salvation of God that He will do to you today. Ki asher ra'isem es Mitzrayim hayom. Just like you saw Egypt today. Lo tosifu v'rosam od adolam. You'll never see them again. Rashi says, that which you've seen them is only today. Today's the last day that you'll see them.
Barber throws another one in here. He said they could have much tried to reassure them, you won't see them again, never again. They might have replied. What would they have replied? Real chutzpah with the answer would have been, if we're dead, we won't see the Egyptians, the Canaanites, or anyone else.
That was a good response.
He was a great diplomat. He knew how to.
Yeah, we're not going to see them because they'll die. So now the verse 14 states,
Rabbi, this was a promise, not a prohibition, right?
it's a promise, not a prohibition. But later on, there's going to be a prohibition about return to Egypt.
Right.
And verse 14 says, Hashem yilachem lachem, God will fight for you, v'atem tacharishun, and you'll be silent. All right, Hashem will fight on your behalf. Then Hashem says to Moshe, this is a very powerful verse, because I think about this a lot. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe, ma titzak elai, why are you crying out to me? Daber o b'nei Yisrael v'yiso, speak to the children of Israel and let them travel. So we imagine that as they're standing there and the Egyptians are turning to them, the Jewish people are praying, and God says to Moshe, no, now's not the time to pray. Pick it up and go. Rashi says, this is what Rashi is saying. Moshe was standing up and praying. God said to him, now's not the time to pray.
It's time to be a leader.
Now's not the time to pray. When the Jewish people are in distress, don't daven along Shemona Esrei. Do something. Can you imagine? Now's not the time to daven. So you go home and somebody calls you up and say, "What'd you learn in the yeshiva today?" You say, "We learned that in a time of distress, don't pray, act." That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to act. Davar acher, alternatively, it's dependent upon me and not upon you. Like it states later on, al banai v'al yadai titzavuni. That it's like on my children and on the work of my hands, are you going to tell me what to do? Meaning to say, God says, don't worry about it, I got this.
So in English, they add here a question mark.
Oh,
Like,
why
yeah,
are you crying out to me?
About the quote from Isaiah. Like,
Yeah, it is with a question. Yeah, I'm sorry, Jeff, what were you saying?
Rashi says it doesn't say it's not the time to pray. It's not the time to.
Right, you should pray, but no, you say do a quick prayer. You do a quick prayer, but not don't drag it out. There's Seth.
I think it's an important lesson. I don't think it's crazy. I think it's.
I didn't say it was crazy. Yeah.
I just feel like, it's like you have zealots that say, I'm not going to use medicine because I want, Hashem, I'm going to pray to Hashem and they heal me. And Hashem's telling them here that you have to save yourself. You have to, put your life first, and that's not the way it works. People be matzliach if you try to, do what's needed to be done.
Right. And I agree with you completely. And also like what Jeff said, it's not saying don't pray, but you shouldn't only be praying. No, not, like when there's a medical crisis, God forbid, it's not the time to just only do prayers. You also have to do other things. First of all, try and figure it out through your own ishtadlus. Maybe go to the doctors.
Rush to Ohio to save Levi Goldstein's life. His Hasidim ran to Ohio to get him what they needed to save his life from COVID. They weren't praying. They were mobilizing.
And not only that, but also even if you don't have a cure and there's no way to heal the person, it's not just prayer there. You could put your life in order. You could try thinking about what things you could do with your final days. That is not just like to sit there and pray all day. I mean, if you're a huge tzaddik, but nobody's a bigger tzaddik than Moshe. And if Hashem told Moshe to not say a long prayer, well.
It also says, and the Lord will make war for you, and you will be silent.
Yeah.
So that's saying, okay, give it to God.
No, I think
there's got to be a place where the two things come together. What is my application? And what do I want from God? And that verse goes to God.
Yeah, I'm fair, but I also think that's a response. The Jewish people are screaming and they're shrieing and they're saying, "You're going to kill us! You're going to kill us!" He says, "Shah, don't worry. Yeah, I think you're right. And I was thinking about when you don't daven too long in prayer. Benjamin had a wonderful Rabbi Simcha Kraus, a great man, a great Rebbe, a great teacher. Used to have the opportunity to study with him. He didn't daven long. He did quick davening.
The quickest one was right in the yeshiva.
He was a very holy man, but he didn't do long davening. It doesn't mean that you're not holy if your Amida is not so long.
The Rebbe did very long davening.
With the Rebbe, because so many people asked him to daven for him. So the Rebbe was davening for all these people, and the Rebbe, they're both. I'm not saying if you daven long, that God forbid. There's so many tzaddikim who daven long. It's not unusual to daven long. I'm saying what's unusual is that you daven short. So obviously, yeah. So
Well, the longer he davens, the less enthusiasm is, and if they sit down and have a council meeting now, should we go into the ocean and keep walking into the water while Moses is praying? I don't think it would have been a happy ending.
yeah, they wanted him to be there, right?
They needed the momentum.
They needed the momentum. Very nice. So he says, speak to the children of Israel and tell them to travel. They have no choice but to travel. Because the sea does not stand as a barrier before them. The merit of their forefathers and of them and of the faith they had in me when they went out of Egypt are sufficient to split the sea. So now he says, God says to Moshe, lift up your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea, and split it. Lift up your hand and your staff over the sea, and then split it, and the children of Israel will come into the sea on the dry land. Says the Rashi, nothing. And I will harden the heart of Egypt. And they will come after them. Harden the heart of Pharaoh and his army, his chariots. Then the Egyptians will know that I am God. When I'm honored there. In verse 19, and the angel of God that traveled before the camp of Israel traveled, and it traveled from behind them. And the pillar of cloud traveled from before them, and it stood behind them. Rashi says, what does Rashi say? And the cloud, the angel traveled from behind them. It was to separate. This was the original, what's the thing? What's the thing that Israel has? Iron Dome, the original Iron Dome. The stand between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. To receive the arrows and the stones that the Egyptians are firing. You should have used this, Steve, when you were at the Defense Department. You could have used this.
We couldn't afford it.
It's free. You just have to pray. In all places it says the angel of Hashem, but here it says Malach Elokim. Rashi's pointing out, in all places it says the angel of Hashem, but here it says the angel of Elokim. Rashi teaches us what's the difference between Elokim and Hashem. Ein Elokim b'kol makom elodin. Elokim represents judgment. That there was a judgment going up in heaven right at that moment. You would like this, Omar. There's a judgment in heaven up at that moment. Should we save the Jews? Are they worthy or not? Wow. What a Rashi. What's your question, Steve?
None. I wouldn't answer that question.
Yeah. Vayisa Amud Anan. And the pillar of the cloud traveled. When it became dark, and the pillar of cloud handed over the camp to the Israelites. So when it became dark and the pillar of fire came, it didn't leave. The cloud did not completely depart when the fire came. but it traveled and went behind the Bnei Israel to cast darkness over the Egyptian army. It wasn't one or the other. They were both there. Wow. That's the ultimate defense. And there was this pillar of fire and this cloud of glory between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of the Israelites. And the cloud, there was the cloud and the darkness, and it lit up the night. And they didn't come close to each other all night. Well, Rashi gives us a beautiful mashal. Mashal, this is a parable. This cloud of glory and this pillar of fire is a parable. Someone who's walking along the road, and his son is walking before him. The bandits came to take the son captive. The father took his son and placed his son behind him so the bandits wouldn't catch him. Then a wolf came from behind the father and the son, so he puts him in front of him. So wherever he goes, wherever the child goes, he's being attacked from behind by the wolf, from in front by the bandits. The son he puts him on his shoulders, and he wages war against them. The Rashi elsewhere, by the way, tells us the next part. Then the boy says, Rashi says it elsewhere. Later Rashi says, he cites this, and then the boy says, where's my father? You understand? The boy's being carried on the shoulders of the father, and the boy asks where his father is. That's like the Jewish people that they asked, where's God? God puts them in back, puts them in front to save them, puts them on his shoulders, and then the Jewish people ask, where's God? There was the cloud and the darkness in Mitzrayim for Egypt. And it lit up the night. The pillar of fire lit up the night for Israel, and it went in front of them. It normally go ahead of them all night. While the darkness of the fog was toward the side of Egypt. One camp did not come near the other camp.
So
yes.
when Rashi says Kedarko, this is the first time that Hashem operates in this way, right? So, and this was probably the only night that both pillars were in service, because the rest of the time the Torah tells us that the Anan was during the day and the Esh was during the night, right?
Well, Rashi tells us here it was about how it always worked, that they were both, they were not mutually exclusive, that they were overlapping. That's what Rashi's telling us here. So now what happened there in verse 21? Moshe picks up his hand towards the sea. Oh, this is very significant. If you want to know where the sea is, the scholars and the books I have up there take a lot of points about this to try to figure out where is this sea that split. So it was splitting the whole night, right? Because there was a strong east wind coming. Beruach kadim azah. Now a strong east wind can mean a wind coming from the west towards the east, or it can mean a wind coming from the east towards the west. So what does Rashi say? Beruach kadim shehi azah sheberuchos, with an east wind which is the strongest of the strong. Meaning to say, Rashi's saying that was not a wind coming from the west towards the east. It was a wind coming from the east, this would seem to be that it was coming from the Gulf of Suez. That's what it would seem to be coming from, because otherwise it wouldn't be such a strong wind. It is the wind through which God will punish the wicked, as it states, Keruach kadim afitzeim, like an eastern wind I will scatter them. Okay. And made the sea like a dry land. And the water split. Rashi says, powerful Rashi. Why does it need to say that the sea split? Because the whole sea is dry, it already says. So Rashi says, Kol mayim shebaolam. All the waters of the world split at that time. All the waters in the world split. The children of Israel came into the sea in the dry land, and the water was for them a wall on the right and the left. Rashi doesn't say anything about this very significant verse. Verse 23, Vayirdefu Mitzrayim, Egyptians pursued them. Vayavo Achareim Kol Sus Paro, all the Kol Sus Paro, Rashi is comment on the fact is singular. All the horse of Pharaoh, Rechbo for Hashav Tochayam, they all came into the sea. Rashi says, V'chisus Acharaya, was there only one horse? So Rashi says, Magid Shein Kuam Chashuv of Me'amakam Kisus. Before God, there were only like one horse. They keep talking about the chariots of Egypt. That must have been like the modern day, the tanks. They all have these chariots. The Jewish people obviously have no chariots.
Very powerful one.
But that would be a great way to destroy a chariot, is to lead them into the water and then get them stuck in the mud, as we're about to sing. And it was in the morning watch. And God looked down at the camp of Egypt with a pillar of fire and a cloud. He confounded the camp of the Egyptians. He confounded the camp. What does Rashi say? Verse 25, 4. In the morning. The night is divided into 3 watches. The one that's before the morning is called the Ashmoras HaBoker. You divide the night, you take the hours of darkness and divide it into 3. And the one that's before the morning is called the Ashmoras HaBoker. Rashi says, why is it called the watch of the morning? Rashi says because the night is divided into watches of songs of the angels. One group comes, and one group comes after a group by 3 divisions. Therefore, it's called the Ashmoras. And that's why it's translated, that's why Unkus calls it the watch or the guard. Vayashkef, Hashem looked down, Vayabeit, and he stared. Komar, Pana Alayam Lashkitam. God looked to them to destroy them. And the Targum means istiki. Okay, we'll have to stop here. At this cliffhanger about what's going to happen. All right.
One more Rashi on the verse.
I know, but
sorry.
we're going to dive in now.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, Shikoch, everybody.